Magic: The Gathering Foundations is an incredible set that unfortunately I've seen many people play off and overlook. Within Foundations came out some really incredible cards, including a new version of the once very terrifying Serpent. Many people who have gone against said card could only describe it as havoc, coming from someone who piloted it with a well-built deck. The creature I speak of is Koma Cosmos Serpent, a 6/6 serpent that can't be countered. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 3/3 serpent token named Koma's Coil. With this ability alone being a huge threat, it doesn't stop there. On your turn, you may sacrifice a serpent and choose to either tap a target permanent, making it not be able to activate its abilities this turn that an opponent controls, or Koma Cosmos Serpent gains indestructible until end of turn. With abilities like these, gaining a new serpent token during each upkeep meant for an easy way to getting combat damage while also being indestructible. Cosmos Serpent may have been a terrifying commander to go against before, but now we have a new Koma Serpent taking over, welcoming the new legend Koma World Eater. An astonishing 8/12 with trample, ward 4, and this spell can't be countered. Whenever Koma World Eater deals combat damage to a player, create 4 3/3 serpent creature tokens named Koma's Coil. With such a powerful creature having trample and ward 4, a player may need to use 3 or more creatures just to block it to survive a single turn. Koma World Eater does sit at a high cost of 2 green, 2 blue, and 3 generic, but once Koma is on the field, even without supporting cards, he is truly terrifying. Before diving into this terrifying deck, I'd like to go over a strategy behind this deck. It is very easy to see we have 2 strong routes to go with Koma. We can either beef him up to hit 21 power pretty easily, or we can focus on token creation. Since his ability only triggers off combat damage, we need to focus on cards that copy triggered abilities and cards that duplicate tokens that we are making. With this deck breakdown, we are going to go over the highlight key creatures, artifacts, and interaction cards that I chose specifically to help create tokens, protect Koma, and help with mana ramp since he is a high costing creature. And finally, some cards to help keep other players' battlefields at bay for us to get in some serious plays and damage. Starting with creatures, let's put a focus on mana dorks first. Koma is a 7 cost creature, so mana dorks are a necessity for this deck, with our first ones being Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, Lotus Cobra, and Erixmethes Slumbering Isle. Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves are easy 1 costs that help us out with mana early on and can serve as blockers for us at a later time. Lotus Cobra helps us with ramping and mana, that's giving us an additional mana of any color whenever we play a land. Lastly, we have the massive 12/12 Erixmethes Slumbering Isle, which enters tapped with 5 slumber counters on it. As long as there are slumber counters on it, it acts as a land, and whenever you cast a spell, you may remove one of the counters off of Erixmethes. Once you remove all counters, it then turns into a creature. Being able to tap for blue and green is a huge way to add some quick mana to help get out other supporting cards before Koma comes in, like Selvala, Azusa, Lost But Seeking, AC, Tyrant of Gyre Strait, and Tatyova, Benthic Druid. With these cards allowing more lands to be played per turn and also bringing in card draw with lands being played is a huge advantage to get Koma out as soon as possible. With a lot of this deck being a high costing deck, I've went ahead and added the addition of Kona Rescue Beastie from Duskmourn. Kona Rescue Beastie says, at the beginning of my second main phase, if this card is tapped, I may put a permanent card from my hand onto the battlefield. This is a huge way to cheat in some higher costing creatures that instantly gives us an advantage every single turn that we can tap Kona. Some other noteworthy creatures we have added are Serpent of Yawning Depths, which says Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents can only be blocked by Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. Additionally, we have Seedborn Muse, which lets us untap all permanents we control during each other player's untap step. Big Fin Bouncer, which when it enters, return target creature an opponent controls to their hand. This is a great removal if an opponent's commander or a larger threat is on the field to bounce it back to their hand so that we have a little more safety. Finally, getting into our larger creatures, we have Crater Hoof Behemoth for an in-game attack, assuming that we have enough Koma Coil tokens. Quilled Great Worm, which has trample, and whenever a creature deals combat damage, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Along with that, remove 6 of those counters off of any creatures I control, in addition to paying its mana cost, and we can cast Quilled Greatworm from the grave. Keeping up with large green stompy creatures, we have Cultivator Colossus, which its power and toughness is equal to the number of lands we control. When this card enters, we may put a land card from our hand onto the battlefield tap. If we do, we draw a card and repeat the process. This effect alone has won me almost every game that I've played with this card, and is an essential for any larger green deck, but very specifically in this deck. Finally, without say, Koma, Cosmos, Serpent. With the ability to create tokens on other players' upkeeps, and with the token duplication methods being played in this deck, this is a must-have to make our deck an unstoppable force. Pairing this with Koma World Eater and Serpent of Yawning Depths, you could very easily win the game in a single well-played turn. With all of these highly valued creatures, we need to get the most value out of them as well. Moving on to artifacts to help with this, we're going to start off by using Fire Shrieker. Giving Koma the ability to have double strike is like giving a mono red player free mana and endless card draw. The double strike with trample is such a beautiful combo to get off some massive damage and to also double our chances of getting in some combat damage. A perfect duo to this though is none other than Sword of Feast and Famine. Giving +2/+2 and protection from black and green really gives us an advantage, with also giving us a chance at doing 20 commander damage in a single attack. This alone is crucial, but with dealing successful combat damage, that player is going to discard a card from their hand, and we untap all of our lands to play more cards from our hand. This is huge for our second main phase to use some other cards in this deck, and to have some open mana for answers to other players' casts. Moving past these, we have the obvious Lightning Greaves, Whisper Silk Cloak to make us unblockable and to give us Shroud, and finally, Koma the Host. What's more scary than one Koma World Eater? Multiple of them, of course. Not only does this create a non-legendary token copy of Koma, but it also gains haste. Using Helm to make a copy of Koma, we have many other cards that can create even more token copies that are non-legendary, that are mainly here to focus on creating copies of Koma's coils. Using cards like Primal Vigor, Doubling Season, Adrix, and Nev Twincasters, and Parallel Lives, we can create a massive amount of tokens per turn, and even on opponents' turns, assuming Koma Cosmos Serpent is on the field. To have some fun with this, let's look at a perfect token creating turn. Starting off with having Koma World Eater, Koma Cosmos Serpent, Roaming Throne, and Adrix and Nev Twincasters out on the field with Helm equipped to Koma World. We will also assume that we have all the set enchantment cards before on the field for token creation. When we switch to combat, Helm of the Host is going to trigger and create a non-legendary token copy of Koma World Eater. At this point, everything is going to trigger, which each enchantment twices the amount of tokens coming out. Since these trigger at sorcery speed, these do line up on the stack rather than triggering all at the same time. With these being added to the stack in any order, we will see a single Koma token being created from Helm, which is non-legendary. The other cards will all trigger, causing the following reaction. Our 1 token becomes 2, which turns into 4 tokens, then 8 tokens, and then finally 16 copies of Koma World Eater. This is because alongside our enchantments, we also have the creature Adrix and Nev Twincasters, which also twices the amount of tokens that we're making, which gives us 4 cards that are twicing the amount of tokens that we're creating. Now, assuming we do combat damage to each opponent using these new tokens, with Roaming Throne's ability on the field as well, we're going to create a grand total of 384 Koma Coil tokens. And if that amount of tokens is not scary enough, when it comes back to our turn, we can redo all of it all over again just to multiply it even more. Moving into our last part of interactions, we have Mana Drain, Counterspell, an Offer You Can't Refuse, Don't Make a Sound, followed by Whelming Waves, which is a soft board wipe to anything except Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. Mana Ramp is a must-need in this deck, so I've added Rampant Growth, Cultivate, the Great Henge, and Kodama's Reach to help us get more lands onto the field and generate us some more mana. Giving us some protection and card draw, we have Propaganda and Rhystic Study, which are no-brainers in this sort of a deck. The card draw is going to help us, and Propaganda is going to protect us from people attacking us early on. And finally, with our more troublesome interaction cards, we have Unstoppable Plan to help us untap all of our non-land permanents during our end step, Nature's Will to tap opponent lands and untap all of our lands if we deal combat damage, and Unnatural Growth growth to double the power and toughness of our creatures until end of turn. Ideally with this deck, we want to be creating more than just our 4 tokens every turn, and honestly, I just want to use them as blockers unless I'm creating so many that my next turn is going to be an end game turn. There are many other cards that play key parts into the success that this deck has, so please don't forget to check out my mocks field to see the full deck list, which I do update frequently. I also want to hear your thoughts on Koma World Eater. Do you think that is a great commander, or do you think it's a card that maybe people should stay away from, knowing that it's a high cost, but there is also a very high reward with it? Also, what other decks out there do you think are going to be an even match for Koma World Eater to go against? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And finally, if you enjoyed this video, learned something new, or found some cards to use in one of your other decks, I would really appreciate you liking the video, dropping a sub with the notifications on to never miss another video, and if you have any recommendations that you would add or change about this deck, or ideas for future decks, drop them all in the comments below, and I hope to see you in the next video.